just a couple of other things that will obviously influence business as well is also the impact of increase in diesel prices. And you all have seen most probably the news this week. There will then be another increase on electricity prices, because a lot of the generators being used by Eskom in South Africa, they then use diesel to run those generators to generate electricity. So immediately, if their input cost goes up by R3.50 or R4 a litre, you can just imagine the knock-on effect that will have on electricity prices. And again, if electricity prices increase, that has a further impact on disposable income that will then influence consumer behavior. And these are just things that makes me lie awake at night, is then also looking at our increasing unemployment in South Africa. And we need to find alternatives to create job opportunities. And I know franchising, we've been talking about this for years. Franchising is definitely one of those vehicles. And I know that on board level, we often discuss this and to see how we can move closer to government and get bigger support from government, especially for franchise type businesses where your failure rate is much lower than independent businesses, and see how we can create more job opportunities to close that gap of unemployment in South Africa. I spoke a bit about electricity, and then linked to electricity then is we started seeing the load shedding starting to happen again, and we're not even in the winter months again. I think these are challenges that we will continue seeing throughout this year, is load shedding or even load reduction, where we will just be forced, where for 2-3 hours a day, even though there's not load shedding happening, there will be load reduction happening. And therefore, I'm just thinking if Eskom can't pay or have sufficient funds to operate or to run their generators, there will just not be enough capacity. So they will have to do load reduction, where we will just see these rolling, let's call it blackouts for 2, 3, 4 hours per region or whatever the case might be, and there will be no electricity. And we all know what the effect of that has on business in general. I'm currently here in Secunda today, and this morning when I arrived, most of Secunda was without electricity. I battled with cell phone reception to speak to my colleagues to know where to go to, and I was in town. So that having a big impact on how you're just being or operating your business. I think another thing that is of a concern to us, and we saw last year, is the unrest that happened in the third quarter of 2021 and the impact that had on business and on the economy in general. Again, because of the scale how it happened, we became aware of the unrest that's happening. But I think outside of that, even before the riots of last year, from time to time, there are areas where riots are happening, and it does have impact on businesses. And I think also I've seen big corporates withdrawing from certain areas because they just feel the risk is too high. And unfortunately, that is in township areas. Now, I had a discussion with one client earlier this morning, and that's one of the focus areas from an Absa perspective, is that we've identified how vibrant the township economy is. There's lots of opportunity in the township areas, and that is where the markets are. And we need to follow those markets. So I think from an opportunity perspective, there's definitely still a lot of opportunity looking at our township environments. Something I think also that one just needs to pay attention to is, and that I've come across now, is the cost of COVID. So obviously you have to put in all these separate measurements to control the spread of COVID, the cost of that, the sanitizer, buying extra sanitizer, the masks, and the impact of that, and disinfecting so many times a day, different areas and so forth. So in business in general, that has become actually quite a significant cost. I think rent, and that's a mixed bag. Rent, I've seen that with some landlords, depending on who the landlord is. They're non-negotiable about what their rent is and what they want to charge, because some of these companies are listed on the stock exchange, and they need a specific return on investment to keep their shareholders and investors happy. But your smaller independent landlords, or let's call it the independent landlords, they're more keen to negotiate rent and is more flexible. And I think that's just something that, especially if you start a business now, is just to take note of what is your rent in year one, and what are those escalations, and what will the impact in the long run be when you get maybe to year 5. And I still pick up that rent is a significant expense if you analyze financial statements. This just maybe coming back to the electricity challenge that we sit with. At Absa, we've got the renewable energy sector or department that focuses on renewable energy and predominantly on the rollout of solar. And if you look globally, what has happened with electric vehicles during COVID, electric vehicle sales was still growing, where internal combustion engine vehicle sales actually dropped significantly. And if you just look at last year, 2021, internationally, over 7 million vehicles that were sold were EVs or electric vehicles. So I think that's also something for future that we need to start looking at, is what will the future look like in terms of transport, and what is the source of energy that will be used, especially if you look at the cost of where fuel prices or where fuel is going towards now. Then electric vehicles will actually become more sensible to start importing those or even start manufacturing that in South Africa. And that again creates an opportunity for jobs as well. And then a bigger scale rollout of solar, so that we are less reliant on Eskom or any other type of energy sources or that we are currently using. And it actually becomes, especially if you're in business and if you're in land and you own your own property, if you invest in solar and it's only even just for daytime running, the cost of that investment you normally repay within 3 to 4 years maximum. And that's without making use of the expensive inverter technology. The moment you start investing in the inverter technology, it just becomes a bit more expensive. But I think if you look in general, Africa is a sunny continent. It's not like Europe where it's cloudy most of the time and raining and so forth, where we can actually be the master of our own destiny by having quite an aggressive renewable energy plan and become less reliant on oil, that is a significant contributor to our energy sources here in South Africa. I don't know if there's any questions. I think from a banking perspective, for us, we definitely open for business. If I just look at how we've changed our way of work again, although I'm still working from home, we're out in the regions, we're out there with the clients, we see the clients, we want to understand the clients' needs, we want to see where we can help the clients and see how we can be part of their business expansion going into the future as well. So I think definitely from a banking perspective, when it comes to funding and providing our services, I wouldn't say that we are as conservative as we were in that first 3-4 months of COVID. We are definitely there to increase funding opportunities as well and assist with funding. But yes, we do double check the numbers still and make sure that the numbers or the commercials does make sense before we get involved in any of those type of investments.